All right, today, do you notice this? You know what this is? Yeah, duck. Good. We all knew duck. We see them around here. Well, this is the amazing true story of a duck they called Gertie. And this story happened near the end of World War II, which was about 80 years ago or so. Actually, this story is almost exactly 80 years old. And so first I'm going to share the true story, and then we're going to go ahead and get to see some more pictures of Gertie. All right, Gertie, the darling duck of World War II. One of the Washington Children's Choice nominees. One April morning in 1945. When the world was weary of war, a duck flew to the top of a tall post poking out of the Milwaukee River near a big drawbridge and settled in. So I don't know if you can see that right there. I think those are the posts they're talking about. People smiled at the plucky duck nesting on a perch so high above the water in the middle of a busy, noisy city. "My lands, isn't she cute?" said one woman. Another wondered out loud, "Now, how in the world?" They looked from the nest way down to the river below. Even if the egg somehow hatched, how could the mama duck keep her ducklings safe? And I know we're right in duck season right now, and I'll see some of them going across the road and wondering how are we going to keep them safe. A reporter came to take the duck's picture for the local newspaper. He named her Gertie. Soon he was writing stories about Gertie nearly every day. People came to the bridge just to peer over the railing and catch a glimpse of her. Gertie seemed to like the crowds. She shook her tail feathers and gave them a glimpse of a bright band around her foot. The people laughed and called it her engagement ring. Newspapers filled with bleak articles about the war overseas now began to include hopeful stories about Gertie. Before long, Gertie stories began to circulate around the world. Even American soldiers overseas read about her and dreamed of picnics, apple pie, and life back home. As Gertie's fame spread, the crowds watching and reading about her grew. The bridge tenders announced that they would be the godparents of the future ducklings and kept close watch over Gertie and her nest. At a time when people worried about the war, everyone hoped that Gertie would be able to succeed in her mission to hatch her eggs safely. The Memorial Day parade route that year went right past Gertie. Band after band marched in the streets, but they got within a block of Gertie on her nest. The musicians hushed and tiptoed across the bridge, all except for one band who played "Rock-a-bye Baby" for Gertie and her eggs. Oh, look at that. Everyone is watching out for Gertie and those eggs. Playful Gertie waggled for her fans. "Look at that gal mug," someone said. "What if she has 'em during the parade?" asked one mom with a brood of her own. "They ought to blow every whistle in town if she does," said her husband. Sure enough, Gertie's first eggs hatched that night. As a crowd watched from the bridge, a tiny duckling staggered around outside the nest. The onlookers named him Bill. Gertie struggled to keep Bill under her wing, but he kept pushing his way out, tail first. Flash news reports about Gertie went out by radio, and the bridge bells clanged. The next day, even more people came to watch Gertie from the bridge. Bill continued to be a challenge for Gertie. Everyone gasped when Bill tumbled down into the swirling river below. Oh no! Frantic Gertie didn't know whether to chase after him or stay with her remaining eggs. The quick-thinking bridge tenders jumped into a rowboat to rescue Bill. After all, he was their godson. But Bill darted away from them, paddling back and forth across the river. Finally, they scooped him up with a long-handled net and deposited him back into the nest. Oh man, he's kind of a naughty little guy, huh? More eggs hatched that night, but a storm was a-brewin'. When the rain began pouring down, the bridge tenders retreated to their shanty to keep watch. Over and over the wind blew the little ducklings into the river, and the bridge tenders scrambled out to rescue them. But the bridge tenders were no match for the fierce wind and storm. Drenched and exhausted, they decided to scoop up all the ducklings, plus one last egg still in the nest, and bring them all into their shanty for safekeeping. Gertie was nowhere to be found. Oh, goodness. The bridge tenders didn't know how to save the last little egg, so they called in duck expert Larry Hotz. The greenish-white egg was cold, but Larry saw a duckling's beak sticking out. He worked all night to free the duckling from the egg, slowly picking away pieces of the shell, bit by bit. Once the duckling was free, Larry rolled it 4 times in cornmeal to get the moisture out of its feathers. He put the little duckling into his hat and set it by the shanty stove to keep it warm. Oh, look at that. Then the bridge tenders braved the dark storm to search for Gertie. They had no idea where to find the terrified mother. Finally, they spotted her, used some food to lure her into a little box, and brought her back to her ducklings in the warm shanty. With the little family together again, Larry and the bridge tenders discussed how to keep the ducks safe. They couldn't put the ducks back out into the storm, and even once the storm cleared, their nest was so high that the ducklings could be swept off again into the churning river below. Larry Hotz had an idea. Ooh, I have no idea what his idea might be. The next morning, Gertie and her family greeted their fans from the big picture window of the Gimbel's department store across the street from their nest. Word got out, and everyone came by to see Gertie and her quinducklets, Dee Dee, Freddie, Millie, Pee-wee, and Bill. So many people pressed up against the window that Gimbel's had to erect a barrier to keep the glass from breaking. Oh, what a good idea, so everyone can see what's happening with them. For 3 days, the ducklings made their home in the store window. They had fresh water, a sandy floor, and plenty of food. Registered nurses worked around the clock to keep the humidity and temperature just right. Gertie and her ducklings were safe, but a store window was no place for a duck family. So when the weather cleared, Gertie and her 5 ducklings rode with a police escort to a local park and moved into its lagoon. A joyful parade of fans followed to see them. Not long after that, the war was won, and soldiers came home to their families. Gertie retired from her starring role on the tall post in the Milwaukee River, but the happy story of the plucky duck and her ducklings helped lift the spirits of a war-weary world, giving people a reason to hope for a brighter future. And there is more to this story, and so I have a slideshow where you're going to get to see the actual photos that we just heard about and see the ducks in person. So I hope you enjoyed Gertie, the darling duck of World War II, and now you'll enjoy the slideshow.